Hi folks, I'm Len Yule, and besides being a rawhide braider, I've been a horse trainer and a history nut since I was a tiny child. And as I got to studying the roots of horsemanship, in the year 2000, I was invited to the Falkland Islands to teach a clinic, and 2 years later, 2002, I went to teach a series of clinics, and I discovered a really different looking set of reins in a barn, and I asked, oh, those are funny looking Romal reins, to which I was told, no, they're not Romal reins, they're Falkland Island breaking reins. So that got me to digging more on this history. And what I began to see was that our Western horsemanship that we love and are so proud of, and all connected with our rawhide gear, did not start out in California in the missions. It had much, much deeper roots than that. I'm going to take a brief look at saddles, saddle design, and then into the kind of reins that I discovered and give you a little bit of the background on it. First, I'd like to introduce my friend Johnny Beard. Johnny has a history bug too, and has done some braiding and saddle making and all sort of other neat projects like making and using flamenco guitars. And he's gotten really interested in producing old-time saddle trees. This tree was really a rebuild, wasn't it, Johnny? Yeah, speak up so they can hear you. Yes. and he reconstructed the tree and made a little bit of alterations and then covered it with rawhide. So that's how he fits in here. He covered it with rawhide. Right. And this other tree, it's one that he's working on right now. It's still in the wood, but the interesting thing is that in my research, I have a pretty good library, and I have a book called The Horsemen of Afghanistan. And believe it or not, people in Afghanistan ride saddles with trees almost identical to this, even today. And they've been doing it for centuries. This carries across into other gear that our roots go way back. Luis Ortega said in his first book, California Hackamore, that the art of rawhide braiding was brought into Spain by the Arabs. Actually, a lot of those were from North Africa, but there were a few Arabians amongst them. Came into Spain in 711 AD. They brought the craft of rawhide braiding into Spain. And from there, it was brought to the New World. So in 1519, Cortez and about 300 soldiers and 16 horses invaded Mexico and began to establish the Spanish kingdom in the New World. They were using a style of rein that became modified in different countries. The roots go back to India and Afghanistan, and they were actually was the ancient Asian archer's rein. Johnny, you want to play horse for me for a sec? The way that these reins were used is they would just hold them in one hand, and they could be transferred to the other hand. They held that way or this way. And I have a photograph in one of my books on the horsemen of Afghanistan that there's an archer has been running towards the enemy, shooting his arrows as he goes towards them, and then when he gets into the last effective range, his horse does a 180-degree turn in the air, and as he's leaving, he has that rein draped over his little finger, and he fires one more arrow over the horse's rump. That was known as the Parthian shot, because the Parthians another Asian group, invented it. We've modified that in our modern speech to a parting shot. So when you've been in an argument and you leave the room with one smart aleck remark thrown over your shoulder, they call that a parting shot. But that's corrupted from the Parthian shot. Well, these reins were brought to the New World by the Spaniards. Here's another pair that's just a little bit different, same kind of stuff. With that would be along the lines of what they used in Asia years ago. Well, these reins that I saw in the Falkland Islands, I got to discussing it with Pablo Lozano a few years ago, and because I have some books on the gauchos in Argentina, and I noticed that some of them were using a similar type of rein. And Pablo told me that now this style of rein is still used in the most northwestern 6 provinces of Argentina, but that years ago they were used all over Argentina. They were then taken to the Falkland Islands. Now, if you look at the different reins of the different countries, we're familiar with our Romal reins, like used in California and since then all over the world. This is a pair of Romal reins that, if you get to looking there, you can see the roots and that Asian rein that we used years ago. Now, they didn't just come to California. After the conquistadors arrived in Mexico, they dispersed in various directions. I think that a lot of our gear came from Baja California, just south of Alta California, and were brought up into what's now the United States from there. But they also went south. So if you go to Peru, you'll see some very different rawhide reins, very finely braided with a romal, and they're connected with a little figure-8 swivel. But that's very, very common in Peru. And then in Chile, they have a romal type rein where the reins are way too long, and the romal part, which they don't use that term, is very short and heavy, and they coil the excess up in their left hand and two-hand the reins. But you can see that they came out of this very same style of rein that was brought from Asia. In Argentina, they used that rein that I mentioned. And so we see a connection, a flow of horsemanship from Asia through this, across North Africa, and the Muslims brought them from India, across North Africa, into Spain, then to the New World, and then began to spread. So we see that saddles and reins and bits and a lot of other gear have their roots actually in Asia. And I just find it very fascinating that the history is there a little different from what we thought. Thank y'all very much. Hi, I'm Len Yule, and I hail from deepest, darkest LaSalle Parish, Louisiana, in the little community of Nebo, the last place in the United States that had free open range grazing, so it's more cowboy country than you realize. Among other things like carving wood and ivory and building saddles and doing some forge work, I'm a rawhide braider. We moved to Oregon 3 times while I was growing up, so I learned a little bit about buckaroo gear while I was out there. I braided my first leather in 1962 and my first rawhide in 1964, and built a few saddles as well. I've butchered a lot of rawhide in my time. I make my own rawhide, cut all my own string. I've designed a string cutter. The thing that I enjoy making the most is bozels, hackamores. I'm a hackamore horse trainer, 53 years I've been training horses for the public, using a traditional bosal to start them in and train them. And I'm particularly fond of that old California system of horsemanship, and so I enjoy making the gear for it. Over the years, I've made a lot of hat bands. I even paid for a farm with reins and hat bands.